You're listening to the Broken Havoc podcast on YouTube, where we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and as the frickin' referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. What's up, everybody? It is Broken Havoc here, right here on the Broken Havoc podcast, here with Old School Showcase Episode 2. This week, we are going to be discussing the first episode of ECW on Sci Fi from June 13th, 2006. Of course, this is the very first episode of the failed WWE relaunch of ECW. And yeah, a lot of people know about the failed relaunch of ECW. I know I do. Everybody hated the relaunch, in my opinion. But I kind of have a soft spot on at least the first few months. Yes, it wasn't ECW authentic, but it's WWE we're talking about. Of course, they're going to fuck shit up, as they usually do. And they still do to this day. But we're going to be talking about ECW on Sci Fi. But before I get on with this review on the second episode of Old School Showcase, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. And also be on the lookout for my future reviews. Not only that, check out my other reviews that I put up on the channel. I actually recently uploaded my Raw review, and as well episode 2 of New Shock that it's already up on the channel. So check it out right here on the Broken Havoc podcast. But we are going to be talking about ECW on Sci-Fi from June 13th, 2006. A very memorable show for all of the wrong reasons, to be quite honest with you. Of course, this is coming off the heels of ECW One Night Stand 2006, which is arguably one of my favorite shows, one of my favorite pay-per-views of all time, in my opinion. And it really kickstarted the whole relaunch of ECW. And a lot of people, as I've stated last week on my ECW One Night Stand 2006 review, a lot of people did have high hopes for this new ECW brand. And little did they know that this whole relaunch basically fell flat on their faces, and it failed miserably, starting from the first episode. And there's a lot of things that WWE did wrong, and to be quite honest, a lot of fans, including myself, would have done things a little bit differently on this show. But we're going to be talking about ECW on Sci-Fi. The show starts off with a video package recapping One Night Stand. Of course, it also shows what happens on Raw the previous night. Of course, ECW on Sci-Fi at the time aired on Tuesdays. I believe it was at 10 o'clock on Sci-Fi, so it was a 1 hour show, so it was basically on the same time slot as what Rampage is today. But it was only a 1 hour show. It was not a 2 hour show. And not only that, I think it was right for the show to be a 1 hour show, considering the fact that the roster was just so damn small, and there was only one championship in the entire brand, which was actually really stupid as well, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. But then it shows a video package of what happens on Raw. Of course, John Cena just running rampant on everybody after he lost in controversial fashion to Rob Van Dam when Paul Heyman came in and did the referee count, when he did the 3 count. So John Cena's pissed off. So he basically stated on that video package that he will show up on ECW, blah, blah, blah. So, for the ECW diehards that do not like John Cena, and, they're really excited for this whole relaunch, they're going to be seeing John Cena on the first episode of ECW. So, yeah, that's kind of disappointing if you're like a diehard ECW fan, to be quite honest with you. But the show opens up. Of course, the theme song is "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor" by Drowning Pool, and then it leads to the classic ECW theme. Then the show opens with Paul Heyman, who is the representative, or aka the general manager of ECW, introducing the new champion, RVD. Of course, he won the WWE Championship at One Night Stand. He is the new champion, and Paul Heyman has a bag, which I assume is a new belt. So RVD comes out, of course, with the WWE title, and of course, as he teased before One Night Stand and during One Night Stand, he's going to be rechristening the WWE title into the ECW World title. So RVD comes out and he thanks Paul and the fans. It says, "We all saw at One Night Stand he defeated John Cena and won the WWE Championship. And say hello to your new champion, Rob Van Dam." And he said John Cena was going to show up tonight, and says that was awesome because then it helps them celebrate. And says, of course, he's excited to be the new champion of the new ECW. Granted, that whole title reign did not last long, and I'll explain that later on. So then Paul Heyman then introduces RVD, and with the new ECW World Heavyweight Championship, and I'm going to be pulling up the photo right here, of course. This is the photo of RVD with both the ECW and the WWE Championship. Of course, the ECW World title is the belt that RVD holds up right there. And fun fact, the belt that Paul Heyman gave RVD was actually not an actual belt. It was actually, fun fact, it was actually a replica. I believe the next week they actually gave him a real belt, but the spinner, of course, was the real belt. But the belt that Paul Heyman gave him on this particular episode was actually a replica of the ECW World title. So, fun fact right there. But, yeah, RVD, of course, is given the ECW World Championship. And, of course, as Paul Heyman teased, he was going to rechristen the WWE title into the ECW World title. And then what happens is Paul Heyman basically, well, first, RVD tells him he can't think of a greater honor for his career and then points at his heart and all that stuff. And then Paul asks RVD, what is he going to do with the spinner? And in the background, you heard the crowd. Well, this is not really an ECW crowd, and I'll get to that later, but one member, I believe it was in the front row, they were saying throw it down. And what they mean by that is that the crowd basically wanted RVD to throw down the WWE Championship, kind of like what Shane Douglas did with the NWA title, and of course declared himself as the ECW World Champion. They didn't do that here because it would kind of be a slap in the face of WWE, and I would totally understand why they didn't do that, but it still would have been really good television, in my opinion, if RVD threw down the WWE Championship and would have been like, this is the belt that I've been fighting for my entire career, all that stuff, because, of course, back in the original ECW, RVD was actually the longest reigning ECW World Television Champion, and I believe he held that title for a year or two, I believe. Of course, he had to relinquish the belt due to, I believe it was a knee injury. I think they were going to do a unification match between RVD and Lance Storm. Not Lance Storm, my dumbass. Mike Awesome. Forgive me for that. Lance Storm. Where the hell did Lance Storm come up in my random head? No, he was going to do a unification match with the then ECW World Champion, Mike Awesome. And then they were going to do this whole unification title. And I believe RVD was supposed to win the title. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. But, yeah, so Paul Heyman, then after that, asks RVD, what is he going to do with the spinner? And RVD says he wants to keep the WWE title. And he says, this is, and he points at the ECW World title, this is the ECW World Championship, and I will wear it proudly. And then he turns to the spinner, and he's like, and look at this one. It spins. And then he basically just mocks the whole spinner gimmick and all that stuff. And then what happens? Edge and Lita come out. Of course, they are the number one contender for RVD at Vengeance. Of course, Edge was the one that cost John Cena the WWE title at One Night Stand 2 nights ago. And then after that, of course, Edge cuts a babyface-like promo, and he thanks Paul Heyman for inviting them, and he says, although whatever he thinks of ECW in general, he respects RVD, and he says they got a lot in common, of course, by both winning the Money in the Bank ladder match and both cashing in and winning the title. They both cashed it in on John Cena. Now, granted, Edge cashed it in way back at New Year's Revolution in controversial fashion, which would be like the norm of Money in the Bank for years to come. And RVD basically cashed it in the traditional way and, cashed it in on John Cena. And basically they both had a full-on match at One Night Stand at the Hammerstein Ballroom. But, after that, he says it will be an honor to face RVD at Vengeance. Then he offers to shake RVD's hand. RVD, of course, both parties, of course, shake each other's hands. But what happens? Edge, in typical heel fashion, Edge basically spears RVD. Paul Heyman is then just pissed off. But then all of a sudden, what happens? Edge and Lita escape through the crowd. But out of nowhere, John Cena is behind Edge and attacks Edge through the crowd. They both get back into the barricade, or back in the ringside area, I should say. And then after that, what happens? Edge and RVD, but RVD comes back, and then both try to fight off Edge, and both try to take turns in fighting off Edge after that. But what happens is when RVD and John Cena both face off with each other, what happens? Edge takes them out, but then all of a sudden, Edge gives RVD a low blow. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Cena gives Paul Heyman a right hand. So after that, the ECW locker room comes in to basically help Paul Heyman, and then we go to commercial break after that. So, all right. What were my thoughts on this first segment on this first episode? It was not bad. I will say this, it was not bad. Now, before I talk about the whole segment itself, the crowd. So the crowd is not an ECW crowd. Fun fact, the crowd is actually a SmackDown crowd. So basically what they were doing every week on this particular show on ECW, the WWE version of ECW, was they would film SmackDown first and then they would tape ECW after that. So SmackDown and ECW were in the same arena, but I believe in the first few months of the relaunch, ECW still was its own touring brand. The only time that it was in the same arena as SmackDown was the television tapings, but after that, but aside from that, ECW was its own touring brand up until I believe December of 2006 when they merged both SmackDown and ECW. Even though on television they were separate brands, in real life they were basically the same touring brand. So I mean that was kind of stupid because of the fact that you have ECW, and if you want to be ECW authentic, you don't film ECW in front of WWE fans. If you watched the One Night Stand show, you can definitely see that was 100% an ECW crowd. But when you watch the first episode of ECW on Sci Fi, it is a WWE crowd, and you can tell that, like, bar none. Now, granted, the presentation of the show looks in a way kind of like, what ECW would look. They basically try to dim the lights down. Not only that, they had the small little brick set on the side, which I actually enjoyed. It's actually one of my favorite sets of all time. And they had the entranceway through the crowd. So they try to make it as if, this was ECW. So I understand that, but at the same time, it's still kind of terrible because of the fact that you're taping the show, or, I mean, in this case, this show was a live show. So SmackDown would be taped on the same night, but they would air, I believe, on Fridays at the time. I mean, they still air on Fridays, but they would move nights in between this year and, of course, 2006. But, still, I mean, if you're trying to be ECW authentic, I mean, I don't know why you would film ECW with in front of a SmackDown crowd. Now, granted, I believe there are two particular episodes, I believe, in the next month. Of course, the July 4th episode of ECW emanated from the Wachovia Center, where at the time, which is now the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. And, the attendance wasn't great, but it was full with legit ECW fans. So that was kind of ECW authentic. I believe the story was that Paul Heyman wanted Vince McMahon to run the ECW arena, but they decided not to. I believe they did run a house show. I believe the first house show of ECW was the ECW arena down in Philadelphia. I believe that was the brand's first house show. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are photos of it, and I'll just look it up. But I believe the first house show was the ECW arena. But apparently Paul Heyman wanted to, for the July 4th episode, wanted to run ECW in the ECW arena, but Vince decided not to. Now, Paul Heyman was, I believe, in charge of creative for ECW, but he was overlooked by Vince McMahon. So, like, even though a lot of people had hope in Paul Heyman, at the same time, Vince McMahon, it was still like the one who had the last say was Vince McMahon. That's really the norm of it, and that's why the show really didn't get a lot of praise. The show got big ratings for Sci Fi, but product-wise and the show-wise, it wasn't received lightly by the fans. It was actually received very poorly by the fans. But my thoughts on this first segment. Now, back to this show. My thoughts on this first segment. It was not a bad segment. RVD holding both the WWE and ECW World Championships. I mean, I kind of dig that. But at the same time, if he threw the belt down, I mean, Shane Douglas style, I mean, I wouldn't be against that either, but it is what it is. RVD's title reign wouldn't last long, though, because he got busted for weed, I believe, or marijuana, was it? He eventually lost to the WWE title on an episode of Raw in a triple threat, and he lost it to the Big Show. Out of all people, he had to drop the belt to the Big Show. You couldn't have choose like somebody like a Tommy Dreamer or something like that. You had to choose the Big Show. But I'll talk about that later. So we get Paul Heyman and RVD in the ECW locker room backstage, and Paul Heyman basically talks about John Cena ruining the celebration. He says, "How dare John Cena screws with ECW like this?" And he says, if this is how they want to play, if this is how Monday Night Raw wants to play with ECW, then this is what is going to go down. If Monday Night Raw were to teach us they want to bring Monday Night Raw to ECW, then we'll bring ECW to Monday Night Raw. And this Monday, we will show up on Monday Night Raw. And I'm not going alone. I'm bringing with me ECW. And then, the whole crowd, the whole locker room just does some ECW chants backstage and all that shit. So, yeah, so a lot of people were kind of criticizing this first episode because it was basically a continuation of, Raw storylines, which I totally understand. And, this was a common occurrence when it came to, like, ECW, especially with the first few months. of the show. I mean, they were bringing in guys like Kane and The Undertaker and all that stuff. And I'm like, why are you bringing in guys from other brands to pop a huge rating? It makes no sense. The show is called ECW. I expect that, there's a lot of stuff from ECW happening on a show called ECW. That was basically one of the reasons why the WWE brand of ECW failed. But yeah. In our first match of the evening, and this is actually really memorable, and our first match of the evening was the Zombie. Yes, the Zombie versus the Sandman. So this is a picture of the Zombie in which, this became like a huge meme regarding the wrestling community. I will say that. The thing about it is that like this is a zombie and this is your first match on ECW, and so like this is really your first impression to basically like show the crowd or show the audience what ECW is about. But the first match of the entire show's history, running from 2006 through 2010, the entire first match, this whole first match was between Sandman and a freaking zombie. So apparently, before I get on with this whole thing, apparently the wrestler that played the zombie was his name was Tim Arson. I'm looking him up right now, and he unfortunately passed away, which sucks. But yeah, the zombie, he comes in the ring, and what happens is he does this whole zombie voice and all that stuff, and I'm not gonna lie, it was really funny. But at the same time, it was really stupid because at the same time, I mean, like, this is ECW we're talking about. Why the hell are you having a freaking guy dressed as a zombie? Only for Sandman to just come in and just cane the hell out of him and just beat him 1, 2, 3. That is your first match. And in my opinion, I think that what I would have had as my first match, I would have had like a really awesome match. I don't know, maybe I'd put like a Tommy Dreamer going up against a Sabu or something like that. No, but it had to be, the first match had to be, the Sandman versus the Zombie. That, in my opinion, apparently this is a whole thing by Sci Fi. Sci Fi wanted something like this because, of course, Sci Fi, zombies, and Sci Fi apparently fit together. But it is what it is. But the Zombie does the zombie voice, and I will admit, I laughed my ass off. It was really funny. But then the Sandman, of course, comes through the crowd, and then he canes the zombie multiple times. And then he hits the White Russian leg sweep for the win and wins the match. After that, he continues to cane the zombie through the crowd and, backstage and all that stuff. And yeah, so this would basically be a common occurrence with the Sandman for like the next couple of weeks until like they would put like the Sandman in some quote unquote major program. Like literally the first few weeks of ECW, they would have the Sandman just go up against these ridiculous, and I mean ridiculous characters. Like they would have him go up against a guy dressed as Nacho Libre, or like whatever, man. It'd be a random jobber that Sandman would just face. Like it was really dumb in my opinion. It was really stupid, but I mean that's how they were booking Sandman basically. But yeah, after that, we get a recap of Jerry Lawler versus Taz. They basically gave away the whole match of Jerry Lawler versus Taz, which was the opening match at One Night Stand 2 nights prior. And I mean, of course, the match didn't last long, but like, I mean, you're basically killing time by adding this whole recap. What are you, WCW? If you watch the first episode of WCW, like the first 20 minutes of the whole show was just a recap of what happened at Starrcade and at Nitro. Like that was basically that. Instead, like, they basically gave you guys the whole match between Jerry Lawler and Taz. I mean, it made no sense. I mean, you guys could have like filled in something better, but no, you had to fill in Jerry Lawler versus Taz. And I don't know why. That was just really dumb. And our second match of the evening, which is actually not a bad match, of course, was Kurt Angle versus Justin Credible. And this was, of course, during the peak of Kurt Angle's Wrestling Machine run. But this will... Kurt Angle did not last long in the ECW brand, but I'll talk about that later on. But we get a takedown by Angle. We get multiple crossfaces by Angle. We get a kick by Angle. Angle goes for a German suplex, and then he throws Credible to the outside. Then Justin comes back in. Then he grabs the leg of Justin Credible and then takes him down. Then he slaps the hell out of Justin, basically bitch slaps him. Then Justin punches Kurt and hits a headbutt. So he goes for a headbutt. And Joey Styles was like, I've never seen that before. Trust me, he did that when he first came in TNA against Samoa Joe in one of my favorite segments ever. Then he applies the rear naked choke on Just Incredible. Just Incredible taps out, and Kurt Angle wins the match. Then he grabs the mic, and then he calls out Randy Orton. He says, ECW rules, WWE rules, no rules at all. He's going to do to him what he did. He's going to do to him at Vengeance what he did to him at ECW's One Night Stand, and he's going to make his ass tap out. And he's because you're looking at the new face of the new ECW, and he just screams, yeah! Okay, now, I will admit this. One thing that this whole brand got right in the beginning was booking Kurt Angle like a legit wrestling machine. Like, they booked him like a freaking killer, and multiple people will tell you that. They booked Kurt Angle like a freaking monster here, and, that was actually really cool. But unfortunately, his run on the ECW brand did not last long whatsoever because, of course, in August, I believe, of 2006, so and this show happened in June 13th, in August of 2006, he eventually basically requested his release because he refused to go to rehab to the WWE. And at this point, I mean, this guy was addicted to painkillers, man. I believe like the story was like he took like 60 painkillers a day because he was like in really, really bad pain, I believe, regarding his neck and all that stuff. And he had multiple injuries. So Kurt Angle was really not going through the best times during this period of time. But he eventually got released in August of 2006. And then a couple months later, he eventually made the move to TNA, in which he had banger matches with Samoa Joe. So, I mean, the rest is history. He actually spent more years in TNA than he did in the WWE, fun fact. But, yeah. Paul Heyman is backstage, and he's basically ranting, and he's telling the viewer, do you want extreme? Do you want to feel extreme? Do you want to learn what extreme is all about? And he basically talks about how everything he had planned tonight went right out the window. And tonight he's going to bring 10 of ECW's best and put them all in an extreme battle royal. Anything goes, all weapons are legal, and the winner of the battle royal will face John Cena at Vengeance. Most importantly, they will join them next Monday night when they take the fight to Monday Night Raw. Okay, so basically he announces an extreme battle royal, and the winner faces John Cena at the Vengeance pay-per-view, which is a Raw pay-per-view. Okay, first off, I mean, the winner faces John Cena at Vengeance. I mean, okay, great. But, I mean, there's no title on the line. Not only that, he at the last line, he says, most importantly, they will join them next Monday night when they will take the fight to Monday Night Raw. I mean, he could join you if he doesn't win the Battle Royal. You know what I'm saying? And another thing that I'm going to, get off my chest is, like, throughout this whole show, the word extreme is overused, man. Like, you constantly hear in almost every sentence the word extreme this, extreme that, extreme this, extreme that. Okay, I get it. That's what ECW is. It's extreme. I mean, it says so on the title. Extreme Championship Wrestling. I get it. But, bro, you're constantly using the word so many times. Like, this is a common occurrence when it comes to the WWE because, they always are repetitive when it comes to their words. Like, I always talked about the Raw commentary team being repetitive all the time. When, whenever they see a big guy come out the ring, they always call him either a specimen, a colossus, all that shit. The same freaking words all the time. And, they use the word extreme. And, once they overuse the word extreme so many times in almost every one of their sentences, I mean, it just doesn't become cool anymore. And that was one of the biggest problems, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? But, you constantly heard Taz on commentary be like, oh, ECW is extreme this, extreme that, extreme this, extreme that. Okay, whatever. All right. In our next segment, we get Kelly's expose. So basically, this was Kelly's debut. And originally, she wasn't a wrestler. She came in and she was basically a stripper. Like, that was her whole gimmick. And they were really cringeworthy. I do not expect you to basically watch them. I was not the biggest fan of that. I don't know why they did that. I mean, I get it's ECW, and they basically, went toward the boundaries, but, like, I mean, whatever. It was really cringeworthy to watch those. But, yeah, this was Kelly's first experience this basically kicked off her first run in the WWE, and it eventually slowly evolved with her, of course, Divas career. And she became the Divas champion, I believe, in 2011, beating, I believe it was, Beth Phoenix? I think she beat Beth Phoenix, correct me if I'm wrong. But, yeah, that was Kelly's debut in the WWE. She was in Kelly's expose in ECW. All right, now we got our main event. This show is going by quickly. It's only 24 minutes within the video because of the fact that, again, this show is actually it's only a 1 hour show and it's really short. So we got the Extreme Battle Royal. Again, you're overusing the word extreme. So basically, it's an over-the-top rope Battle Royal. Speaking of Battle Royals, we got the Royal Rumble coming up this Saturday. And be on the lookout for my Royal Rumble review. But yeah, we got the Extreme Battle Royal. And the members that are in this match is Tommy Dreamer, Sabu, Al Snow, Stevie Richards, Big Show, the FBI, Little Guido, Big Guido, and Tony Mamaluke. And Balls Mahoney, Roadkill. I mean, Danny Doring was in the match as well. So a lot of ECW names are in the match. One thing I will say, like, the ECW roster, like in the beginning of the relaunch, they had a bunch of ECW originals. But over time, I mean, the only position that the ECW originals were put in was to put over the newer guys. So, like, your CM Punks, your Elijah Burks, your Mike Knoxes and all of the world and all that stuff. And, I totally understand that, but at the same time, I mean, like, you had guys like Tommy Dreamer and Sabu losing, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, Sabu won a couple of his matches, but, like, they were trying to build this whole show around RVD, but eventually RVD basically messed it up for himself by getting busted for weed in typical RVD 420 fashion. But, yeah, Brawl breaks loose since this is a battle royal. The wrestlers go on the outside from the bottom rope because it's an over-the-top rope battle royal. Then Big Show basically cleans house, and we go to commercial. He throws Roadkill over the ring. Once we're back from commercial break, weapons are starting to be used. Then Big Show chops Tommy Dreamer. He hits an overhand chop. He actually hits 2 overhand chops into the corner. Then Balls has a stop sign and hits it on Big Show, so Balls Mahoney. Then after that, Big Show retaliates with a couple of right hands. Then Sabu on the outside sets up a table. Then the FBI and Danny Doring have signs and are hitting Big Show with the signs after that. Then after that, Big Show eliminates Al Snow. Then he proceeds to eliminate Danny Doring. Then after that, he takes Stevie Richards and throws him on the outside. Then he eliminates Roadkill. So Danny Doring's tag team partner, he eliminates Roadkill. Then after that, he throws Balls on the trash can and eliminates Balls Mahoney. Then after that, Tommy Dreamer comes in and goes for repeated shots on Show with the sign. But then what happens after that is Big Show actually picks up Tommy Dreamer, and what happens, he throws him through the table that Sabu set up on the outside. So that was actually pretty dope, in my opinion. After that, he takes out the entire FBI, of course, the full-blooded Italians. Then he eliminates Tony Mamaluke and Little Guido. And then, in typical WWE fashion, WWE loves doing this even today. They got the 2 big men just, if it's like a battle royal or like a gauntlet match, like they would have like the 2 giants face off one another, and then the commentators will go like this. Oh, I'm excited to see this. It's typical WWE. Nobody gives a shit. Yeah, Big Show basically faced off with Big Guido after that. And, of course, Big Show, being in typical Big Show fashion, eliminates Big Guido. Then after that, he eliminates Tony Mama. No, after that, no. Sabu sets up a chair in the middle. Then after that, he basically runs towards Big Show. He jumps on top of the chair, and he has a chair in his hand, and he hits Big Show with the chair, eventually eliminating Big Show from the match. Sabu wins the Royal Rumble, and he will face John Cena at the Vengeance pay-per-view. So yeah, the show ends, and yeah, that was the first episode of ECW on Sci Fi. Overall thoughts on this show, to be quite honest with you, I mean, like, again, as the scroll says on the bottom, it's basically a memorable show, a memorable debut for all of the wrong reasons. That's what this whole ECW brand basically was. It was this whole show, this particular show, was a memorable debut for all of the wrong reasons. And, there was a lot of potential regarding the ECW brand, but history, of course, showed that it wasn't a success. Of course, we had the December to Dismember pay-per-view a couple months later, which actually led to Paul Heyman actually being fired from the WWE. A lot of the ECW originals leaving the company, of course, because of how bad the relaunch was. The whole relaunch of ECW was a complete mess, but it did have some promising things, of course. They brought in guys like CM Punk and all that stuff, and it basically kickstarted CM Punk's WWE main roster career. Not only that, I mean, another problem with the show is the fact that it was taped in front of SmackDown fans. I mean, I don't know, or WWE fans, I should say. I don't know why they did that, but I mean, the WWE is just really dumb for doing that. But yeah, I mean, the ECW brand in general was just a flat out failure, to be quite honest with you. It was just a full on failure to say the least. I mean, it did good numbers for Sci-Fi, but but the fan reception was just really bad. I mean, ECW diehards who just hated the relaunch of ECW and they basically thought it was a joke. And I would say I would like to compare the ECW relaunch to basically, what NXT 2.0 basically is. I mean, like NXT 2.0 is basically the WWE version of ECW. It's WWE's take on what NXT, basically their own take on NXT. And what I mean by that is like, Vince McMahon's version of NXT and all that stuff. And that's what basically this version of ECW was. But that was the ECW on Sci-Fi debut. Overall thoughts, it was not really the best show, but it was, did it make a good impression or first impression? Maybe, in a way. It was kind of but, history showed that, of course, Rob Van Dam basically kind of killed the whole thing. Of course, getting arrested for, possession and all that stuff. It was ridiculous. And it basically led to the whole Big Show's ECW world title reign. And after that, it was just not really, that good in my opinion. But yeah, to be quite honest with you, the ECW brand as a whole was just a flat out failure. It was just a flat out failure. But yeah, that was Old School Showcase episode 2 with me discussing ECW on Sci-Fi from June 13th, 2002. Be on the lookout next week for the third episode of Old School Showcase, where I discuss WWE Vengeance 2006, of course, where we had Edge versus RVD in a really fantastic match that I really want to talk about. But yeah, be on the lookout for my future reviews. Of course, tomorrow I will be coming to you guys with my AEW Dynamite Beach Break review. Of course, we got Dynamite and we got Rampage and SmackDown. Of course, we got the Royal Rumble coming up this Saturday. I will come to you guys with a Royal Rumble review this coming Sunday. So be on the lookout for those reviews on the channel. And yeah, this is Broken Havoc right here from the Broken Havoc podcast. Signing out.